So you want to sell property. Is it as simple as taking photos of the property and uploading it online? Stay tuned and we'll find out. Let's talk about it. I also want to thank my sponsor, Be Well Pharmacy, for sponsoring these videos. Now, let's jump right into it. Now, the first thing that you want to keep in mind is getting the assistance of a trained legal practitioner. So just like last week, you want to consult a lawyer even when you are selling the property. Now, why is this so? When you consider the legal position of a purchaser and a vendor, there are not many situations when a purchaser could be sued, could be taken to court. Not so for a seller or a vendor. You can be sued, you can be taken to court, you and your agent. And so, number one is get the assistance of a lawyer even when you are selling property. Number two, you want to be sure that you can provide some proof of ownership for the property that you are selling. But you might say, but the land is mine, the house is mine. I built the house. I have been living here for the last 40 years. It's just that I don't have a title deed for it. And that is problematic. There are a lot of Vincentians who own property, and I use that word here very loosely. They have control over property, but they don't actually have a title deed to evidence that they own the property that they say belongs to them. And you can't give or sell what you don't have. And so if you don't have a deed, you should not be selling anything. How do I get a deed? We will deal with that in next week's video. So if you own property and you don't have a deed, you definitely want to tune in next week when you will find out how you can go about getting a deed for the property that you own. I don't know, I need to find a different word for this that you own, right? So yes, you can't sell what you don't have. The third thing that you want to keep in mind is, do I own this property by myself? So you have a deed and your name appears on the deed, but your name is not the only name that appears on the deed. If your intention is to sell the whole property, you should not attempt to do it without the knowledge and consent of the other co-owners. Best practice is they should also sign the deed when you are having that sale. If they do not agree to sell, then you should not attempt to sell the whole of the property without their knowledge and consent. What about situations where your name is the only name on it? Are you free to just go ahead and sell? Not necessarily, because in law there is something that is called equitable interest. What is an example of an equitable interest? Let's say, for instance, you have a house, but you did not build that house by yourself. Somebody else assisted you in building that house. Maybe they contributed to a mortgage, but their name does not appear on the deed. Now, can you just simply go ahead and sell it because, well, it's your name alone on the deed and it only requires your signature? Should you go ahead and sell it? Absolutely not. You also want to keep in mind that there is an equitable interest in the property that someone else has. And unless you are intended to contemplate that interest when selling the property, you really should not sell it. Of course, and I do believe that all of you should know, that if there is a mortgage on the property, you should not sell it without the knowledge and consent of the financial institution where you took the loan. Even if you have already repaid the full amount on the mortgage, you should have a reconveyance done first before you sell the property. What is a reconveyance? Basically, it is a release from the bank certifying that the loan is repaid in full and you now have good title to sell the property without their involvement. And so, even if you do not intend to sell property and you have a mortgage on the property and you have already repaid the mortgage sum in full, you should consider having that reconveyance or release done even if you don't intend to sell. In circumstances where there is a mortgage balance, it is best practice for you to have a valuation done on the property. This is because the principal and the interest must be repaid first before any money is passed and collected by you. And having a valuation would ensure that you are getting market value or close to market value, and this would ensure that you get maximum returns when you are selling this property that was mortgaged. In last week's video, we went over the importance of having a survey plan done. It's important here as well because you want to ensure that you are not selling the same property twice. You do not want to sell the same property to two different purchasers. Now, sometimes people do this dishonestly, but sometimes they do it mistakenly. So, what is an example of selling the same property to two different purchasers mistakenly? An example of this would be, let's say you acquired a big piece of land, maybe an acre or more, and you are going to sell the property, not in its entirety, but subdivisions of it, a part or portion of it. And you did not go through the trouble of having a survey done outlining those subdivisions. What is going to end up happening is you have a deed that is signed saying, I sell Robert 4,000 square feet of land, but the precise boundaries are not marked out. Later on, you come to sell Mary 5,000 square feet of land from the same big portion. Unless a survey is done, there is a possibility that there could be an overlapping in the portion sold to Robert and Mary. I hope that's the names I used a while ago. Robert and Mary. And so you want to be sure that a survey plan is done and you are not selling a portion of land to two different purchasers. Right? So it's for this reason it is important for you to have those subdivisions surveyed so that purchasers can be sure of where their boundaries are. Of course, you want to be sure you have the authority to sell. And as I mentioned last week, it's possible that the property that you have, you might be holding it on trust for somebody else, a beneficiary. And so you are now under a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of that beneficiary. And so you do not want to enter into any transaction that is self-serving, that is against the interest of that beneficiary. And as I mentioned earlier in this video, you can't sell what you don't have. And so if all you have is a life interest, and at the end of your life, the ownership or the interest in the property reverts to somebody else or passes to somebody else, you do not want to attempt to sell or to pass what you don't have. And this is where having a lawyer comes into play. And there might be other restrictions as well. So you definitely want to keep this in mind. Now, last week I mentioned a number of things, and some of those things are equally applicable to you as seller, vendor, as it is to a purchaser. What are these things? Agreements for sale, property taxes, ensuring that you don't owe property taxes and the purchaser does not owe property taxes as well. Conflict of interest, and ensuring that the person purchasing the property from you has an alien landholding license if they are not a citizen of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, or they do not hold citizenship from a country that is exempt from having an alien landholding license. So if you did not watch last week's video, I invite you to go back to it and look at it. And if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, all of these videos are in one place where they are easy to find. Now finally, and this is perhaps the most important, you do not want to sign a deed without getting paid. In the same way, a purchaser does not want to part with money, spend money, hand over money for property and not get a deed at the end of the transaction. Unfortunately, these things happen all the time. I have encountered numerous situations where persons say, this land is mine, I paid for it, sometimes $40,000, $50,000, and they have no deed. And the person who they paid for the property has already died. These are situations that you want to avoid at all costs. And so remember, you do not want to sign a deed without getting paid. Now, best practice is you get your check at the same time you sign the deed. It might not always happen that way, but I'm just letting you know that that is the best practice. And if it is possible, you should ensure that it is done that way. And just as a bonus, you want to enlist the services of a good, experienced real estate agent. And I want to recommend Caribbean Dreams because this is a young man who has incorporated technology into his business model to ensure that his customers get the maximum reach, not only locally here in St. Vincent and Grenadines, but across the world. And so check him out. That's been it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys next week, same time, same place.